Today, on our 300ZX build video, we're going to be getting rid of some eyesores. Now, some of these eyesores are actually potential fire hazards, and others are just cop magnets or just ratchet car mods. So we have a couple things on our table of things to do. Well, I guess this isn't really a table, it's a S13. First thing I want to do is take off the plasti dip from the back wheel, one singular, and the rest off of the other wheels, because there's some leftover plasti dip on here. Plasti dip isn't really my thing or my style, and I'm sure you're probably wondering right now, why is this in the air running in gear? Well, I'll tell you. In the recent video, I just fixed the speed sensor, so that means that the speedometer actually works now. But that means I've been driving around for a whole gas tank worth without logging miles. I am huge on logging miles on cars, especially when you track the maintenance on it. So I need to make up for some of those miles so it actually adds up and it makes sense. And unrelated to that, I think the higher the mileage on a car, the cooler. Some people like their cars that have low mileage, but honestly, if I saw a 300ZX with 1,000,000 miles, I'd be like, damn, that thing has some stories to tell. Just like this thing, you know? Although I can't really drive as much anymore because, you know, I put so much time into it. Now I'm like, oh, I don't want to. But this car is just junkyard spare parts just to make another fun car. It's always important to have a fun car if you're a car enthusiast. Now, if you make a serious car, it's not really as fun anymore. Yes, it can be fun at a drift event, don't get me wrong. Maybe it's just the stage of the build. This is the stage where you can just do anything you want, tinker around with it, and just have fun. And that's what building cars is all about, for me at least. It's just having fun, having a good time, and making friends and memories out of it. So to tackle the plasti dip, I have brake clean as a partial option, just as a maybe. I'm just curious more about that one. Aircraft paint remover, that's definitely gonna get the job done, and goof off. So we're gonna see which one of these works best. I previously tried WD-40 and that did not really work at all. As for these light bulbs, does anyone have any idea what these go to? I'll let you guess. The hint is green. Hopefully we'll have time to put this fourth exhaust tip on. Next we have fuel line. Why do we need fuel line? When we temporarily rerouted the fuel lines, we moved them from here down to here so I can put it along the firewall. Now, I do have a junction here and here, which is right above the exhaust manifold. Pretty sketchy in my book. Very temporary thing, so it's not gonna be so temporary anymore. We can throw these on. And then we also have the radio. That's more of a creature comfort. It's not really an eyesore. And it's not really an ear sore either because the car is nice and quiet while driving. So I think the first thing we're gonna do is do the fuel line. I would just throw these on there, but it's actually more of a process than that. Yeah, see, doesn't always work. Since the car is already up in the air, let's just deal with this plasti dip now. I'm actually gonna pull the wheels off of the car because I don't want to accidentally damage the paint that's on the car or ruin my nice new lug nuts, even though I just dropped this one and scratched it. Oh, it's good to do a visual inspection when you take a wheel off. Yep, it's all good. Let's see which one works the best. First, aircraft paint remover. Next, goof off. Brake clean. Oh, man. You should probably read the directions, huh? Okay, the aircraft remover, which is the first section, you basically have to let that sit and bubble up the paint for a minute. This one, goof off, you need to spray on a rag and then use the rag to wipe it off. Yeah, okay. Okay, brake clean isn't even designed to do this, so let's see if that even does anything. Actually, kinda flaking off a little bit. I think aircraft remover is gonna be our best bet, though. Oh, yeah, instantly. Look at that. Looks like it's also taking off the finish of the 300ZX wheel. That's not cool. All right, so we have a nice, healthy coat on there. We'll let that sit and bubble for a minute. Well, I'd almost say it looks more ratchet at this point. I'm just gonna try and take off the rest of this finish, and I don't think I'm gonna worry about doing the rest because it'll take off more than what I want it to. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are gonna give me recommendations in the comments and how I messed up using this aircraft paint remover. So I guess we'll just go from there and I'll take your guys' advice. Also, this stuff isn't cheap. This is over $20 a can. But it does do the work, I will say. I was curious and started using this card, and it definitely works way better than the towel. The towel kind of smears it around, whereas the card kind of peels it off. I think we can all agree that this wheel is completely ruined, at least the finish. So we're just gonna go ahead and use the wire wheel to finish things up. Now, I may have gotten a little carried away and turned a completely black wheel into a somewhat chrome wheel. But I mean, at least it looks better than black. And honestly, I don't really want to do that to all four. I don't even want to admit how long it took me to do just that one wheel. At least over an hour, maybe an hour and a half or two. Hopefully I don't drop one of these lug nuts this time. Oh, it's already on. Can't forget the center cap though. Well, this wheel is still an eyesore to me, but it's a lot less of an eyesore. I cannot stand black wheels. Next, let's take care of the fuel lines. So the best way to go about this is to release the pressure in the system. What I personally like to do is start the car and then go to the fuel pump and just unplug it. That was really fast. Do you guys remember when my RB ran for like 45 seconds with the fuel pump unplugged? That was wild. All right, don't forget to turn the ignition off. Now, I should have used most of the pressure in the line. That's not gonna get all of it, of course. I personally like to wear gloves when working with fuel because I hate getting fuel on my skin. So this is fuel rated hose and the size is 5/16, the diameter at least. The length doesn't really matter. I just got it really long so we can cut it to size. What I'm gonna do is just mount one side, route it, and then cut it. Because I don't actually know how long I want it to be. I might have it longer than what these are currently. Now you also don't want to get these two mixed up. One of these is feed and one of these is return. You can tell if it's return if it has a pressure regulator on it. So see this little guy, kind of looks like a mushroom. This is a fuel pressure regulator. This always goes on the return side of the fuel rail. So for example, this line goes in and then turns towards the front and then goes back and then loops around here to here. So that's how I know the left side is the return side. Now, why does that matter so much? The return side does not get the fuel filter. The fuel filter goes on the pressure side. So the correct order is fuel pump in the tank, fuel filter, fuel rail, fuel pressure regulator, return. I'm just hoping not too much fuel comes out of here. Wow. Not much. And that's the benefit of unplugging the fuel pump first. I'll take this off of the fuel filter since that was the feed line off of the fuel rail we just took off. Now this would be the perfect time to replace this fuel filter, which I do have a new OEM one to put on, but I left it at my brother's, so we're gonna have to save that for another time. That's all right. Fuel lines are more important at this time. Although this thing does look original, so it's definitely due for a replacement. And now we'll start the return side. We're going to take it off the rail first because remember, if we lift it up from there, we can drain whatever fuel is in the line back down into the gas tank. And I typically just push these clamps forward, meaning like this, so they'll sit on the rail. So when you put your new hose on, you already have the clamp here ready to go. Oh, someone's coming out. At least we caught it. Let the rest strain down. All right, we got both fuel lines off. So now I'm going to mount both of these hoses onto the filter and the return line here. And if you're ever wondering how tight to tighten your clamps, I personally tighten them until you cannot push it and then the hose turns. So like I'm holding the line itself, pushing down on the clamp, and it's not spinning. That's good to me. There are two lines. Definitely want to utilize this mounting hole that we did before. Don't even know what that was for, but it's for fuel lines now. That already looks way better. Instead of having the connection there with these jank hoses. All right, wrap these around this way. Perfect little loop. And just trim the sides. That's pretty easy, huh? Now I did have big cutters at one point, but I have no idea where those went. So I'm gonna have to try and do this with snips, or I might have to just use a razor blade. The fuel lines are nice and tight. Now before we move on, I want to verify that there are no leaks in the fuel system. That is definitely not something you want to overlook, but I'm also very pleased on how this turned out. It looks way better. First things first, let's plug in the fuel pump. Ignition on. No leak, no leak, no leaks. So far so good. Now we'll start it up just to be 100% sure. Not that it's really gonna make a difference, but hey, what the heck. Let's hear it. Make sure it works. Man, honestly, I think we should just put the radio in now. I just keep putting it off and I'm driving around in silence like, And honestly, I'm pretty sure this Z came with a radio harness adapter, which basically allows you to run aftermarket radios. Yeah, that's what this is. Let's make sure this harness fits before we go about converting it. So many plugs. Okay, that one's good. Oh, perfect. Looks like these two were for different options or something. I don't know. Looks like this is already wired for an aftermarket radio. Usually if you buy one of these adapters, it doesn't come with the second half. And also, it looks like they use these twisties. And people wonder why their cars catch on fire. And they put it together like this. This is why I always like to use solder and heat shrink and electrical tape. Look, that just flipped off with ease. I'm just flipping it around and these are flying off. Don't use these. Your car will catch on fire. This plug is weird. Anyone know what this is? All these gray wires go into it. All right, let's take a look at this radio that Logan gave us. Now these should usually come with a connector like this. And you always want to test fit this in the back of the radio before you do all the work and solder this together. Especially if you're getting this used off of someone. You never know. Okay, that plug's good. Now all we have to do is remove this ghetto harness and match up all these wire colors to this conversion harness. Now what if I told you there was a way to solder these together and heat shrink them without using a soldering iron? Well, that brings us to today's video sponsor. Solder stick connectors. I've actually used these solder stick connectors before when I worked at a performance shop, and I'm honored to be able to promote them now. These solder stick connectors are weatherproof and they have the solder built into the center. All right, let's prep this harness together. First thing we're gonna do, we're gonna take off the rest of these plugs because, again, fire hazard, not good to put in the car. Wow, look at this ground. That's hilarious to me. The chassis plug is prepped and ready to go. Now this is the sub harness from the radio. Sometimes you can just pull little fittings off of the ends, but this is not the case. So we need to strip the ends of each wire. Now if you don't have one of these fancy wire strippers, that's okay. You can use just a regular wire stripper, which I don't even have, or even a razor blade. You can just cut all the way around the shielding of the wire and then pull it off. Both of our sub harnesses are ready to go. Now for the first wire I connect, I'm gonna use solder and heat shrink. That way you guys can see how much easier it is to use the solder stick connectors. So when you're planning to connect a wire, you always want to slide on the heat shrink first. Because if you forget to do this, and you solder it first, then you can't put your heat shrink on. The first wire color we're gonna match up is purple with a black stripe. Slide the heat shrink on, find it on the other harness. I like to spread these open just a little bit, not too much. Then I push them together and I give it a slight spin. This will help keep it in place a little bit easier. Now there are tools that can hold these wires in place for you, but I don't have that tool. So we're going to just work with what we got. Next, we'll grab the rosin core solder. Rosin core is basically the rating. That's just what's inside of the solder itself. And rosin is rated for automotive. And then I personally like to heat up the wire first just a little bit. And then I let the solder drip through it. And then once it's on there, I heat it up real good. That way it's nice and even. Let it sit for a second. If you grab it too soon, the wires may fall apart. Flip it over. Check how your connection looks, and that's good. We got it all the way through. And the heat shrink I slid all the way to the bottom so it would not be affected from the heat of the soldering iron, because if it's too close, the heat shrink will close. So move that up, try and put it in the center. So you just use your heat gun and the heat shrink just shrinks with heat. That's what I call a heat shrink. Now we verify our connection, make sure the heat shrink is all the way evenly closed up. And it looks good. Now instead of using the heat shrink, soldering iron, and solder, we are just going to use solder stick connectors and the heat gun. Since we started with the purple wire with the black stripe, let's do the purple wire with no black stripe. Now it's really cool how the front of the case gives you all the dimensions based on what color it is. Wow, and in millimeters. That's really cool. Most companies don't do that. And it even tells you the temperature the heat shrink needs to be at and the solder. That's really cool that they included that, especially if you're worried about your heat gun not meeting the ratings. But alright, let's see. We're going to probably use the red one because this is 22 to 18 gauge. So you just slide this on first. We'll connect our two wires. Again, I like to spread it out just a little bit. Now our connection's ready. Slide this on top. And you want the solder point to be in the center. Then we'll hit it with our heat gun and you can watch the solder do its magic. Wow, it's so cool. You probably shouldn't be using the heat gun right on top of this case. And just like that, you have a solid connection. Weatherproof as well. Looks like the solder got a pretty decent spread, and this weatherproofing material on the side really hardened up nicely. That's going to be a lot stronger than just the heat shrink, because the heat shrink is basically just, you know, the outside like this. But this is weatherproofing. Here they are side by side. You can see, you know, the black one, you can start to flake up. Like I said before, I'm honored to be working with solder stick connections, and I highly recommend using this method for connecting wires. Not only are you going to save yourself time and safety from fires, but you could also save yourself money because you're not buying solder, heat shrink, and then the soldering iron separate. And then the heat gun. You only need the heat gun and the solder sticks. I need to get the rest of these wrapped up so I can make sure the radio works. And thanks again, Solder Stick Connections, for sponsoring this video. It means a lot. I'll leave the link below so you guys can check it out. The harness is connected enough to make sure that the radio works. There are 2 wires that didn't connect yet, and that's because it's not really clear what each wire does. So when I have the radio on, I'm going to touch them together and see if it does what it's supposed to do. I'm really curious, however, to see if the radio antenna works. That'd be so cool if it did. Oh, I'd be so hyped. I think mostly because I've never had a car with a working manual old school radio antenna. It's such a 90s vibe, and I'm all about it. I'm not even sure which port the radio is supposed to go in. Does anyone know? Is it top or bottom? Guess we'll just have it hang out for now. Radio's connected and our loose wires are off to the side so they're not touching anything. Well, looks like this radio didn't work after all. Thanks for nothing, Logan. And I did check the radio fuse just to be sure, and it's good. Well, I went to the parts store and a local grocery store, and none of them had the radio, so that's tomorrow's problem. But we can get rid of one more eyesore while we're out here tonight. Any idea? The clue is green. Let's replace these license plate light bulbs, finally. Let's see. Some crusty, dusty screws. Hopefully they come out. That's it, just this little cap. Erase, delete. Although I will say, this looks like a 194 bulb, and this is a 921. I don't think this is gonna work, honestly. We'll still try it. Yeah, see, the cap's not gonna fit. Dang it. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm not putting the green light back in. We're gonna run one green light. Since we suspected this radio is probably dead, I went out and bought the exact same radio. That way I don't have to rewire the harness plug that I just made. Plus this radio looks kind of decent, so gotta give it a shot. The most satisfying thing with new products. Fresh. For some reason it's still not working. So here's what I'm thinking. I know with the 240s you actually have to run your own ground. Basically when you hook up the ground wires to the harness adapters, it doesn't actually ground through the chassis because the stock radio grounds through the case. So I'm going to peel back some of the shielding on a ground wire and try and attach it to the dash bar on the inside and see if that turns the radio on. Oh man, did I just buy this radio for no reason? Oh, no, I have 2. So we have our black wire here, grounded to the dash bar. Let's see if this turns on. Oh, there we go, it's on. And if I take the ground off, it turns off. That means I do need to run my own ground. Now I'm curious, I'm gonna turn the key off, if this radio did work. Same thing, ground to the dash bar. Oh, this one actually doesn't turn on. Well, I don't feel so bad now buying a new radio. I needed to do that anyways. Finally get some gas. This will be our first official fill up that we can log. I'm sure a lot of you guys were wondering about how many miles I put on when I had the car up in the air. It was only like 10 or 20 miles, so it really didn't make much of a difference. It should have been realistically around 200 or 300 to really make up for how long I drove it. Also, that sound is normal. Someone told me that something's messed up or stuck. That is normal. If it's not doing that, something's messed up. You want your gas tank to have a vacuum in it. Never noticed this little sign. Premium unleaded fuel only. Super Sans Plum Sulement. Does anyone know what that is? Never heard of that before. So, all right, it says premium. You get premium, even though you got a truck motor. These gas doors do have a little holder for the gas cap, but I never tend to use that because whenever I remove the gas pump, I always knock it off. So I just always put it on the trunk. Normally on all of my other cars, this is about where it would stop. $50, 10 or so gallons. But this is an 18-gallon gas tank. It's not all the way on E, so I don't think we're gonna get 18 on this fill up, but man, does it hold a lot of fuel. 13 gallons, not too bad. Now I like to log my miles because whenever I make a repair on the car or an improvement, I can then see if the fuel economy improves, decreases, or whatever. I don't know. It's just fun to keep track. Maybe just because I'm an analytical guy. So you just basically write down the miles and then the cost and then how many gallons. So now that we have our first accurate reading, the next time we fill up, we'll be able to see what the fuel economy actually is on the KAZ. Pretty excited for that. And a lot of people ask me what app this is. It's called Fill Up. It's on Android. I'm sure there's something on Apple, something similar, something that'll get the job done. And I'll reset the trip so I can see how many miles it gets per tank. And also, I just picked up the correct light bulbs for the license plate light. So let's get that knocked out. The green's gotta go. Well, it looks like this bulb fits way too loose in here. It just comes out so easily. So we're gonna have to make some adjustments at the house. There we go. That's much better. No more cringy green light. Although, maybe I can use these for something. I have added a ground lead to this harness, the radio harness, and I just used the midpoint of all the grounds. There's actually 4 ground wires that connect to one. Pretty interesting. Pretty sure the old harness had that and I thought it looked whack, but here we are doing the same thing. So now I can bolt the ground directly to the dash brace. Reconnect the harness once again, and the radio once again. Okay, we are ready to rock. We can officially see how this radio works and test these open wires that we still have. Oh yeah, sound quality's great. I just paired my phone. Let's see how it works. I'm impressed for stock speakers. Holy crap. Alright, radio's good. Now I wanted to see if the antenna signal worked. This turns the antenna on. I don't know if it'll actually work though. I'm pretty sure this needs 12 volts. And then as for the other harness, this is the illumination. The radio should dim when the lights are turned on. Oh, it does work. Look at that. Off, on, off. I'm gonna hold it and we're gonna turn the light switch. I'm holding this with my knees. Lights off, lights on. Sick. Now I'm not seeing a wire coming out of the sub harness to really test the antenna, but this is the antenna activation, so I'm just going to jump it to power, which luckily these pins are very accessible, so I don't need a T-pin. So if I push this pin in here, the antenna should go up. Let's see if it happens. No way. Whoa! It's going back down though. I took the wire out. That's cool. Oh, what if I put that on a switch? That'd be pretty funny. You guys already know we're going to use the solder stick connectors to attach this last wire. And something I didn't even notice before with these connectors is that one end is actually a larger diameter than the other. And that goes for all gauges. I don't know if you can really tell in the video, but this side is smaller than this side, which is so clutch because then you can slide over your twisted centerpiece without any hassle. So just keep that in mind if you're having an issue sliding it over. Got the harness all cleaned up. Just gonna install this for now. Pretty sure the radio is supposed to go on the top, but it's on the bottom right now. The next thing I want to do, I guess it's technically not an eyesore, but it's a drivability sore. So when you're shifting gears and putting it into first, you have to push the clutch all the way down to the firewall and then go about going into gear, which is normal. You're supposed to really push it in all the way. But the thing is, if you start to release the clutch pedal even like 1 millimeter, the car will start to grab instantly. So that's way out of whack. So what I need to do is adjust the clutch master push rod. All right, we got that spun out. You don't want to push it out too much because then your clutch will always be engaged. So I'll slide the jam nut back in and then test drive to confirm. Really want to do this carpet next. Oh man, it's way easier to get in and out of gear. Before it was really, that scared me. Before it was really notchy. All right, let's test out where the catch point is now. Before it was all the way at the bottom. Going up, 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 up. Perfect. I'd say it's right about in the middle, which is the sweet spot. At least in my opinion, that's where I like it. So if your clutch doesn't feel right, mess with your push rod a little bit. The longer you make the push rod, the higher the catch point. The shorter you make the push rod, the lower the catch point. We're finally tackling this carpet trim area. There's 2 other trim pieces over here I need to put on. One goes right here, and the other one goes right here. Oh, and the other one goes right here. All right, those are good to go. Now we need to figure out how we can mount this carpet securely. Probably should put more staples in here, but I don't have a staple gun. All right, it's on, but I didn't have the correct hardware, so I had to use some big-headed screws. It'll get the job done until I find the right hardware, but man, what a difference. That looks way cleaner. This thing is finally starting to take shape. Next thing I want to do is the exhaust tip. I keep bringing it up, and I keep wanting to put it off. So now we're gonna put it on. Just get this over with. So I'm actually gonna just turn the car around so I don't have to extend my wires too far from my welder. The easiest and fastest way to install exhaust tips. There we go. Welded on there. Although this one's shinier than the rest. Maybe I should take the wire wheel and even that out a little bit. The point of this video is to reduce eyesores, right? That makes sense. There we go. Now we're talking. Way better. Unfortunately, we do not have a new third brake light to throw on here. Hopefully soon we can find something to either replace this with or fix it with or cover it up with. But thank you guys so much for sticking around. Don't forget to drop a like in the video and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.